I'm David Solomon. In addition to being the Director of Research and Creative Activity at Christopher Newport University in Virginia, I'm the current chair of the Undergraduate Research Programs Division of CUR, and I want to welcome you to this month's Undergraduate Research Programs Exchange. These 50-minute Zoom sessions are monthly facilitated exchanges of ideas and information on a variety of topics and issues related to undergraduate research programs. Sessions are recorded and made available in the CUR community and the CUR URPD website. These exchanges are not designed to be formal presentations, but instead begin with very brief introductions by facilitators and then open for discussion. Today's session addresses cultivating a research mindset on your campus, and we're fortunate to have colleagues representing 5 institutions to facilitate the session. First, I'll pass it off to them. They'll introduce themselves. We'll go through some slides, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion. I'll pass it off to my friend and colleague, Ann Betcher.
Thank you. And can
Oh,
you
wait.
share the
Yeah,
slides?
yeah, it would help if I clicked on the share button and not just the PowerPoint button.
No problem. So thank you for joining us today. We're excited to share from our programs, but also to get input from all of you. And David, I think you're sharing the presenter view versus just, there we go. Um, I'm at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I'm our Assistant Dean of Research, and I've been with Kerr way too long to remember how long I've been with Kerr. I'm going to let our other facilitators introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. So, Kara?
It's morning for me, so good morning or good afternoon where you are. I'm Cara Loy. I'm the Dean of University Credit Sciences, Health and Human Services at a regional college in Northwest British Columbia, Canada, closer to Alaska than I am to the Canadian-US southern border. It's nice to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Ramos, she, her. I'm the Associate Director for the Office of Undergraduate Research, where I oversee the at Oregon State University, and I'm excited to be here with you all.
Is Tim here?
Yes, and my name is Tim O'Neill. I'm the director of the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program at the University of Colorado-Boulder. I currently serve on the Undergraduate Research Programs Division as a division representative, and I'm pleased to see everybody so near the end of the semester, and early congrats in getting across the finish line. Jeffrey?
Yes. Hi, good morning, all. Jeff Ratliff Crane. I'm a psychology professor and academic director for our new one-stop experiential learning hub uh, at the University of Minnesota Rochester. So we're in Rochester, Minnesota, near the Mayo Clinic. And I recognize that most of us are coming from more STEM-like campuses and R1 campuses, but so I did want to note that I have background also on liberal arts campuses and leading research endeavors across. So I'm hoping that'll be part of our discussion as we go along as well.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So when the group got together to talk about what a research mindset is, we discovered there's not a whole lot of work published out there on this topic, but we did draw from several. And we're choosing to start the conversation focusing on the students and what the university can do to support students. And so we drew these statements or derivations of this statement from 2 publications. And David's going to share, I think, in the chat, the link that has all our resources and some thought questions for you. So for students, a research mindset, which is based on some of the other mindset definitions, is a systematic approach to inquiry that strategically collects and critically evaluates information for evidence-based decisions and includes the following traits. These traits are from a recent study that was STEM focused, but we think that they apply broadly across fields. So open-mindedness, believing in oneself and the research, persistence, honesty, being critical, and communication. Next slide.
I actually can't share that in the chat right here. So if
Okay.
somebody else would like to drop it in, I sent that document to Todd and it's going to go out to everyone afterwards.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. We thought it might help to give a little bit of framework, both on the student side and on the institution side, why you would even want to think about this. So for all the reasons that we do research with students, the same reasons apply to why we want to make sure students are establishing a research mindset, because it will make them invested and make them identify with the research process. Research is a high impact practice, and it gives students those skills that we want them to have as they move forward. Equally important when you're trying to support undergraduate research and support the students on your campus is sharing with the institution why it's important for students to establish a research mindset. And so thinking about the academic identity of the institution, the success of the students, and then all of the different types of partnerships and funding that might go along with supporting the student process. So we're going to shift now and share some stories. So next slide. And I'm going to transfer it over to Kara and to Jeffrey to share what their campuses do to support student research, or to support the research mindset in students. I can speak.
Kara, you want to jump in?
All right, Jeff, sorry, I thought you were going to go first. So on a couple of research university campuses that I worked on in Canada, we supported a research mindset with students by partnering with the library to offer peer-led library sessions around research, the research process, how to find funding opportunities, how to contact a professor about your interests in doing research or supporting their research with them. And we developed co-curricular records on the University of Saskatchewan and University of Calgary campuses so that students could get acknowledgement and a sort of summary of the research skills and abilities that they developed across these sessions, peer mentorship, and the related activities. Over to you, Jeffrey.
Okay. And from our point of view, looking at that student research mindset and recognizing how much there is the overlap with our student learning outcomes for the campus, backwards designing what we wanted to do to really treat research involvement by students as part of the educational process has been a focal point. Two elements. One is that how do we institutionalize the kinds of opportunities and reinforce those learning outcomes, but also to, with about 40% of our students are first generation college students. They're all coming in thinking they're going to be doctors or nurses, and they discover research after they're here. I know from other places, many students don't come in thinking about research. So how to build community around that. So by connecting with student clubs, we have a very active student research club, for example, and engaging with our admissions office and student life more in general, trying to build a sense of belongingness and how this connects with where students are. And so again, really trying to treat this as a backwards design to start to build and connect to where students are in their mindset, but using the institution as a way to help support that.
David, if you want to shift to the next slide. So so you now have a little bit of flavor of thinking about the student side, especially if you're overseeing undergraduate research programs. It's important to be thinking about where your institution stands on this process. And so I am lucky at Embry-Riddle. I can look in our values, mission, vision, and our strategic plan for where undergraduate research and establishing the research mindset sits. So in our values, we specifically state that Embry-Riddle provides a transformative educational experience through fostering collaboration, teamwork, ethical and responsible behavior, and a culture of research and discovery that mirrors the professions we serve. So that culture piece is already there. It's also reflected in our vision focus for our Prescott campus, which is on problem-based. The focus is on problem-based discovery, and our strategic plan then equally supports that with an undergraduate discovery portion. It's really helpful if you can parse out the pieces of your values, mission, vision, whatever those components are at your institution, so that you can use those in language when you're speaking to students, when you're speaking to donors, and when you're speaking to funding agencies. Those will all help show that the university supports that research mindset and establish its place for students. Tim's going to give a more concrete example of that from his institution.
Thank you, Anne. And here at CU Boulder, like many of our campuses, we have a high intensity research environment, and faculty are doing projects and spinning things up all over the place. And what we really want to focus on in our program is centering that culture around mentorship and student engagement. And to do that, we have a very simple model of our Mentor Award, which helps us accomplish a number of different things within the culture. First, very simply, we invite students to nominate their mentors, whether these are faculty, graduate students, postdocs, for recognition. And the award that we put forward for them is that the recipients will receive the opportunity to support a student with an assistantship in the next academic year. This often incentivizes students to nominate their mentors. They might be the recipients of that, and it often does work that way. But more often than not, students are just extraordinarily sincere in nominating their mentors and talking about the transformative experiences they've had with them. And notably, we just went through this process on our campus, and I read through all of these nominations, and it's it's sometimes hard to get through that pile without a box of tissues, I have to say. Uh, um, it's a great moment for us as a program to hear these stories. And then I also encourage everybody to consider how you can share these stories out. We share our nominations and awards with department chairs as they think about P&T, encouraging them to put those in personnel files. And we also share those broadly in campus PR and putting out press releases as broadly as possible to tell the story of student engagement and what kinds of impacts this kind of engagement and mentorship has on our student population.
David has asked the first question. So before we shift to Stephanie, who's going to share some prompts, David asks, which comes first, a good mentoring environment or a good research mindset on campus? I'll take a stab first. I think ideally you want a good research mindset that supports students to help support all the other things you're doing, but that isn't always the case. I've been at institutions where perhaps that wasn't there initially. And so you can start building a good mentoring environment with even just a small cluster of people starting programming for undergraduate research. And so I think you have to start where you have the support. And sometimes it builds to a research mindset on the campus, and sometimes it trickles down.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an iterative process. The most of our research mentors for our students are actually off campus, and their focus is on their lab first and foremost. And our focus is, as you described, and much more on the students. And so, we're one monitoring who are the good mentors, but trying to reinforce it, but also providing some, you know, trying to build in more training for. We don't like to use that word training, but opportunities for mentors to learn what it means to work with an undergraduate student who's discovering research for the first time, and making sure that, and also working with students on how to, if you will, mentor their mentors a little bit and communicate in the other direction.
I want to jump in because I think this is a great question, David. It's the chicken or the egg, which comes first, and I think we could look at it from either perspective. And I'm looking at it from I always put mentoring first because that's just kind of my philosophy. So I think you have to have the mentoring environment because that lays the groundwork for getting students to feel included and that they belong. And I think from there, right, this can help lead to creating the environment and the culture. Um, on the other hand, if we focus on the campus mindset, that in itself can be a catalyst for helping to create that mentoring environment, right? But with that, then we have faculty who are bringing the students in, departments are looking at this, maybe looking to reward their mentoring. And then you also have that institutional support, the dollars, the infrastructure, right? And so I think in general, just to answer this maybe is they have to co-evolve or be together, work together. Because I don't think you can build one without the other. Like, I don't think that's our goal here, right? And hopefully this either working on one or the other, wherever your institution may be, it can help evolve to spread this across the campus. Yeah, great question.
Yeah, just one final thought on the question, David. I think the answer is somewhat embedded in your qualifier good. And that is, what kind of research mindset are you trying to develop? And I think this is a group that can probably agree on some of those aspects of what defines a good research mindset. And I think few of us would exclude mentoring from that. So, yeah, I think that's as Stephanie and others have pointed out, it's a foundational component if we're really trying to cultivate the culture that we want to see.
And this is great, David, because it leads to the next slide with kind of questions that our group came up with. And just, these are more either rhetorical or for us to have a discussion. We have questions for the student mindset and for the institutional mindset, which will be on the next slide, but really just thinking about what the group needs. Our thoughts are, right, as we share the experiences that we have and how we think about creating this culture, shifting this culture, or supporting the culture that we already have. How could your institution be more intentional? What are the challenges that we may encounter in trying to do this work? Are there assessment strategies? And as is in the handout that is shared, there's a lot of resources in there if you weren't able to attend the I think it's called CURE, the COEUR, characteristics of excellence for undergraduate research. Thinking through who are your strategic partners on campus and how are you maybe developing those relationships and just kind of where we can go from here. What can we do now? And so I'll leave these here and we can also share the institutional ones, but more of a space for discussion.
We'd love to hear your questions or thoughts on either of these. And I can chime in on the barrier side for both the institutional and the student side, something that we have struggled with and are still looking at ways to deal with. I know it is at a national level since there's a CUR working group on this. How you can recognize the mentors in their workload and in their tenure and promotion. And so some institutions have great models where this has been fully incorporated, like the College of New Jersey, I think led very much in part by many CUR members who are at that institution. But others struggle with this, and I know it's something we're struggling to define in Embry-Riddle and to figure out how to count, which can be a huge impediment to having new faculty become mentors or for sustaining mentorship from our strong seasoned mentors.
Yeah, having clarity on the typical 3 points of the tenure review of teaching, research, and service. There's often a misunderstanding or debate that needs to be solved within a campus and within a department as to even which category mentoring undergraduate research falls under. And I think CUR is one resource to be able to help provide some guidance. But those of us that are interested in this, we need to be actively, speaking up and making sure those are included in our tenure documents and so on.
We have a question, comment. Ashley Fricks Gleason.
I think Sarah had their hand up before I did.
Yeah.
Whichever. Yeah, so I guess I wanted to also think about barriers for student participation, and I think this needs to be kind of another thing to think about, and it may be different on your campus. So everybody should definitely be surveying your students and figuring out like what are those not only barriers, but obviously the enabling factors to participation. But I know here at Louisiana State University, and I feel like the URPD gang have probably heard me beat this drum before. It's the notion that students should work for free at research. Our university has done a lot over the past few years to increase the number of low income and first generation students, and we have exploded. Our campus numbers are kind of crazy right now. But I am, of course, then encountering a lot of students who cannot participate in research as an extracurricular at the level you would want them to really getting any sort of meaningful experience from it, right? So sure, some of them could maybe volunteer for 1 or 2 hours a week, but what are they really getting out of it? When what we really want them to do is to be in a lab or in a research project for 5 to 10, maybe more hours a week during the academic year, which, is a lot to ask for students to do their coursework, volunteer somewhere, and then probably we know most of our low-income students are also working a job. And so I think this is a really big barrier for a lot more students at our university. And it's probably, I would imagine, similar a lot of your institutions as well. It's hard to figure out how to solve that issue. Work study is definitely there. But of course, not all students have work study, qualify for it, can get it. We actually have a huge wait list for our work study. And then, of course, at this point, asking, I guess, faculty to put maybe undergraduate research line items on budgets for grant proposals, like that, things like that. But it's a big issue for us right now. So anyway, just wanted to throw that in there.
I want to just respond for that, Sarah, because we have the same issue. One of the things that we've done at Oregon State is when we're on the quarter system, so we have a little bit of an advantage. If you're on a semester system, it might be a little bit harder, but we go back to financial aid. So we ask when we're doing our funding in the beginning of January, and then we go back to financial aid in March to see if there are any funds that haven't been used by students. Because they might have a wait list, but those students might not be even if they are on the wait list, might not be ready to get a job at that point or have a job on campus. And so going back to work study and just saying, hey, just checking in, we know that there's a wait list. We have students who are ready to be hired. Have any funds freed up, and making that relationship with those folks because we take our list, we send it to them, they tell us whose work study. We do some outreach if students haven't accepted or don't know that they should accept, and then we kind of coach them on accepting and why and how. So I don't know if you're already doing that, but that's something that we've gotten a few extra students in. It's not a lot, but some.
Yeah, we do. I do something similar. So I sort of do it piecemeal where whenever students come to my office, then I'll say like, oh, because of course, I don't know how your university does it, but LSU does this thing where whenever the students are first offered work study, they have to click accept. And of course, you know, a lot of them when they're freshmen have no idea what it is and they're like, no thanks. Or so like then we have to like kind of like you're saying, like contact for us it's our student employment office, and kind of get them reinstated, get them on a wait list. Like you were saying too, we're on the semester system, so usually by springtime it's a little easier to get them there. The other thing that I do as well, for a lot of the programs in our office, is if I see any students who are tagged as Pell eligible in our system but don't have work study, I do notify the work study office, and I'm like, how can they be Pell eligible and not have work study? And so it's really easy to get those students kind of bumped up then onto that list as well. I don't know, that might just be like a snafu over here at LSU, but it's just something too to kind of look out for. Probably in your own systems, you have a way to see like who are those Pell eligible students. And those are students who I believe their family income is like at 150% of the poverty level or below. So, but yeah, these are all really good points. You do have to do a lot of work with the actual, whatever it's called at your university, the work study office, the scholarship office, financial aid office, to do these things. But of course, then we just have all those students who are not eligible at all, right? They're like right on the cusp of being eligible for work study, but for one reason or another, you know.
Hey,
Go back to Ashley here.
yeah, I just wanted to chime
Oh,
in
go, Jeff.
on Sarah's, acknowledging the lack of funding. We also need to acknowledge the students' time and their learning, and again, the mindset, the learning outcomes. We've upped our how we've set up our credit. So it's not just you're getting credit for time. We've actually set up a course. Students sign up for 1 to 3 credits where they're getting they're able to meet follow up on some of that research process. They're pulling together ways to present their research, so it's not required of the lab that they're working in to do that, but we're using this as a way to help acknowledge the time and acknowledge the learning that the students are doing. Ends up on their transcript, and it can give a little bit of space for students if they're not in a paid situation.
That also helps the mentor side in some cases when it is tied to a mentor. We've started doing that with some tech electives that students do. They get credit and the faculty member gets recognition as part of their teaching load for that.
That actually leads into my question. I would love to know from you all that have figured out ways to get faculty credited in their teaching load for it, what those equations or metrics might look like for you, because both institutions I have been at have been unable to figure out an equation or an arithmetic, right, that makes folks happy in terms of how many students for how many credits with a given faculty member equals some amount of course load reduction for that faculty member. So I'd love to hear more about that if folks have examples.
I'd like to respond to that question, Ashley. It's a really good question, and I'm a qualitative researcher, so you may or may not like my answer.
Yeah.
But 2 things that I was able to instigate in my position of undergraduate research coordinator at the University of Saskatchewan was a faculty or school scorecard of undergraduate research. So not at the individual faculty level, but across a faculty, and then all of the faculties would report that to the Vice President Research Office on how many undergraduate student opportunities with some parameters and determinations they could report on year in and year out, and it became a source of pride. And faculty, individual faculty would then promote that to their communities, which in turn led to additional funding and so on and so forth. I don't know how it trickled, if it did trickle into promotion and tenure applications, but it was, once you start measuring things, people pay attention. The other thing is perhaps your campus is like this. We had a narrative that if people were good teachers, aka good mentors, they were kind of lackadaisical on the research side. I was positioned in the undergraduate or in the vice president research office, and I said, I don't think that's true. And we did some research. We had all the numbers, all of the researchers and the funding that they were bringing in, and the number of undergraduates that they supported. And it's true. If you are a great mentor and a great researcher, you're also a great teacher. And so we just had these high performers that we were able to substantiate. We were able to recognize them when we had dignitaries from the university come to our undergraduate research events. We would give them speaking notes to highlight those champions, and that really created a lot of momentum for others to sort of take up the initiative once those early champions were visibly recognized. Hope that helps. No numbers.
Yeah, no, it does. I don't mind no numbers. That's fine. I think the struggle here is it's not buy-in. I mean, the faculty are already putting the time in, they're doing the good work. They have the students, some of them have 15 at a time, in a research group, but they, for better or worse, do see that as quantitative, right? Because it is hours out of their day that are spent doing that. And particularly if they will make the argument, I would argue rightly, that, if I was teaching a class with 9 students in it, that it was a 3-credit class, that would count for something. But if I have 9 students in my research team, each taking it for 3 credits, that isn't counting for anything currently, right? So it's that arithmetic that I'm having to grapple with a bit here.
Yeah, we had developed a really good faculty, we called it the faculty honorarium plan. Faculty accrued tokens for mentoring and research, and then over time, when they hit a certain threshold, they cashed out. They either got a stipend, course release, or money towards their lab. It worked fantastically for 2 years, and then the provost said, we need that money for sabbaticals, and that was the end of that program. So it was very successful, but it was also costly.
Yeah.
Um,
That actually might go farther here than the course releases, honestly. Like if
yeah.
if it was a pot of money I was able to put my hands on in our office, that actually might work better. That's a good
Let me
suggestion.
know if you want the details. I'm happy to share
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
Lance, comment, question.
Yeah, I was going to respond to Ashley's question. I don't necessarily have a good answer. But before I was in this role, I was chair of biology department at a small liberal arts college. And one of the things that was imposed on us was a butts in seats counting by the administration. And so we fought extensively that research credits, students enrolled in courses and we compensated our students primarily through coursework during the academic year and then paid them in the summer. So we got a little bit of the summer to count, but since faculty were compensated separately for that, there was resistance to that. But during the academic year, because you would have 5, 6, 7 students working on your team, we argued and got that counted into our butts and seats counts, basically. So as chair, I was responsible for our department had to average a certain number of, butts in seats per faculty member. And so I didn't let my individual faculty necessarily know what their numbers were, although, if they were smart enough, they could do the math themselves. But instead, we talked about it as a department, and we talked about research involvements in that. And so we would work with faculty were, sort of heavily involved in research. We would look at how the rotation of high enrollment courses worked. So we didn't necessarily, if somebody wasn't working with a lot of students and somebody was working with a lot of students, that didn't necessarily mean that, that they shared equally the high enrollment intro course in terms of their teaching load or whatever, because they were meeting that overall portion of the butts and seats for the department. And I found that having open and transparent conversations about those things within our department was actually really healthy, and helped faculty be aware. It allowed us to have some conversations about even how cures count, because the course prep time for a cure is a heck of a lot more than one where you're just walking in and having them, do the same setup kind of stuff. So we would even factor some of those things in as we talked about it as a department and what that load looked like and how we distributed it, both in terms of service load within the department as well as sort of meeting that butts in seat piece. And by arguing for that, because as a department, we had to have a minimum butts in seats per person average in order to ask for a funding increase, in order to ask for a replacement line, in order to ask for a visiting faculty line during a sabbatical, all of those things. Because we were doing that, because we had a good formula in our department that articulated that, we were able to make those arguments more effectively, I think, than other departments were, because we were open and transparent and talked about it. So that was at a department level, wasn't necessarily able to change the broader culture necessarily, but I don't know what has changed in the couple of years since I left there and how they're implementing that.
I think that's a really good point because we have one of our chairs of one of our engineering departments who's using exactly that same kind of model, and he started it himself with his course and then some directed studies breakoffs to sort of model how it can work for faculty. It hasn't spread broadly, but he just started this last year, but that's the attempt that our mechanical engineering program is trying to take, exactly what Lance described.
I have another question, which is sort of looking at the other end of things. So let's say you do have a successful, whatever that word might mean, research mindset on your campus. How do you deal with potential burnout of faculty who are mentoring undergraduate research? Because we know that the good ones tend to get a lot of students, and there's a burnout factor there. And by the same token, some of my really good mentors are new faculty, but they don't have the time to be able to mentor undergraduates because they're worried about going up for promotion and tenure.
We do have conversations with the faculty, and every faculty member who participates as a mentor, there is a sign-off process for chairs and deans to assure that they're recognizing it. But we've had some faculty who we have said, you need to step back. I have 5 projects coming in from you. Is that really a realistic thing for you to be doing? And we often encourage the new faculty, here's the information about the program, but maybe hold for a semester and two until you can get oriented. Because we have seen burnout, and we've seen faculty leave in part because of that burnout and lack of recognition.
Yeah, this goes hand in hand with the previous discussions. I mean, it really does. If it's not worked into the tenure and promotion and merit documents, and I mean, we've done away with calculating workload solely on number of credits, and have take into account things like mentoring and the like. I mean, there's likely already formulae available about supervising internships or other kinds of things like that that could be, connected with that. But it really needs to be, depending on the discipline, what research and scholarship means. And again, which bucket does this count in matters very much for the tenure line faculty. And the one other thing that I do encourage is, yeah, and I think Anne had suggested it, is really having those heart to hearts with some of the mentors that are going too deep into this, because that's not helpful for anybody if they're not around later on. And but it's also for those of us that are in these departments to start to cultivate some that may just not be speaking up, that may be afraid, I don't think I could be a good mentor, don't know how it works. But I mean, there are people that are just never going to do it. That's fine. Don't waste your time. But to really make sure you're developing folks that may be reaching a different stage in their career as well, that just haven't done it before, and bringing them into the fold, finding ways that they could partner maybe with other faculty to relieve some of that load. And again, where we end up have put a lot of our emphasis is finding off-campus research opportunities that which, again, depending on where you are, that might be more or less available.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat for Lance. Lance putting you in the hot seat here. Um, Ashley admits this may be a cynical question, but did your approach as chair feel equitable? So departments where the same folks who have used research teams are the teachers who don't struggle to fill their sections, so they're effectively carrying the department. If we're going to use the butts and seats computation, those faculty still would feel like they're drowning because they're not getting any course release for those large research teams. Did you encounter that, Lance?
I guess you're going to save me the rest of my typing. That's frantically working on that. I, what I had started to say, Ashley, is that one of the reasons why we did it was because we had no way of giving releases, and the credit system that some of the folks have, like we had studied it and we had looked into it, and there was no way we weren't staffed at a level where we could actually cash those in and actually use them, right? And I talked to, I won't name names of institutions, but I talked to several institutions who have been sort of showcased in Kerr at various times on their policy for giving these things. And when I talked to them, put them on the hot seat, they're like, yeah, nobody can cash them in. Like we accumulate them and then nobody knows what to do with them. So like after having several of those conversations, and I'm sure that there are some places where it works, where they're staffed differently. But a tuition driven institution that wasn't staffed that way, it wasn't going to work. So we had realized that that was just not possible. So I will say in the short term, it worked for transparency. So, and for full transparency, like I took over as chair in 2020, where morale was as low as it could possibly be, right? And was chair for 3 years until 2023. So the long-term effects necessarily, I'm not there anymore to kind of see. In the short term, I think because everybody was frustrated and there had been a lot of that sort of behind closed doors, finger pointing, I'm carrying this much of load, you're not, da 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 da. As a department, just putting it all out on the table and having that transparency was a healthy thing for us all because everybody was stressed during that time period for a whole lot of reasons. And this was kind of putting it out there and taking it out, and it was doing the group problem solving because I refuse to say, hey, I'll just pick on you because you asked, hey, Ashley, you have met your butts and seats number, so you don't have to research. You don't have to mentor any research students. But hey, David, you're 2 students shy, so you have to either get 2 students in your class or pick up, right? Like I had peers who were chairs who did exactly that. And I just didn't think that was healthy and I refused to do it. So when we talked about it as a department about how do we share the load, one of the things that I also did is I came in and I said, within this department, in order for us to do everything that we have to do, everybody has to take on a job. And some of these jobs are time intensive and other jobs aren't. So let's look at where are our other commitments. Let's everybody lay stuff out because there were people in the room who didn't realize like we had a long-term ecological research site in our department, and that took a lot of maintenance that the people on the molecular side, because it was out in the field, didn't appreciate, I would say. And so having that person actually explain that and why they were taking maybe fewer research students because they were driving the tractor every Saturday morning to mow the grass or whatever it was, those kinds of things, I think just helped our department be that transparency just helped everybody with being a little bit healthier. Now, again, I don't think it fixed it. And I think in the short term, it was a healthy way of handling it and kind of moving forward. So I don't know that I have really good answer for you. I will say that research was still uneven. Like there were some faculty who were strongly committed to it, some faculty who weren't. But those faculty who weren't, if they didn't have other jobs, they understood that, hey, you're going to teach freshman seminar every 3 years instead of every 4, or you're going to teach the big section of freshman bio, or hey, in the fall when we're short on enrollments and I need to add them, I'm scheduling you in the big room, and yours is going to be the first section that we add seats to. Those kinds of things and being transparent and overt about why I was making those decisions, I think was helpful.
Yeah, when I was department chair, we tried to set up a model. It was a small department, so I should qualify with that. A model whereby we looked at research, service, and teaching as a departmental issue and not as an individual one. So that as a department, we were committed to doing all three of those things at a certain level. And if there was a semester when, Professor X had to finish a book contract, then Professor X didn't have to do as much service, but somebody else had to pick that up. And, somebody maybe who didn't have a scholarship in play that semester. And it worked a little bit. It was a little bit of a battle, to be honest. And I left the institution before it could implode, but it was working when I left.
I don't know if this helps at all, but something we have also tried to do here as we do external partnerships with groups. Historically, we asked for support for the students and supplies, and now we are consistently requesting support for the mentors and making the case that if we don't have a mentor here, this project's not going to move forward. And we initially thought we would have resistance, but there hasn't, okay, in the three that we have moved forward with that model on, there has been no resistance at all. And in fact, they've embraced that and recognize that time that it takes to do the projects.
Yeah, and as Jeff alluded to when we did the introductions, I think that works well in a STEM environment. Outside of that, that's a tough sell. Because, for example, in the humanities, we don't have external partners. And so there's no money at the well even to get, even the basics. So that's a challenge, but I see how that might work. Any other comments or questions? We wind down here? Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for participating in today's URP exchange. Sincere thanks to our great facilitators, Ann at Embry-Riddle, Kara at Coast Mountain College, Tim at UC Boulder, Stephanie at Oregon State, and Jeff at University of Minnesota, Rochester. We also want to thank Kerr and especially Todd Wagner for his great tech support every time. This was our final URP exchange for this academic year. I think this was the seventh or eighth one that we've done, and they've been quite successful. So we look forward to a new series of exchanges beginning in September. If you've got a particular topic you'd like to hear about or share, please contact me. You can always get me on the Kerr community or contact your URP divisional rep. Enjoy the rest of the day. Good luck with the rest of the semester, and hope to see many of you at Connect UR in Grand Rapids or online virtually in June.